So thanks for joining us, everybody. From those that don't know me, I'm Scott Miller, Chief Executive Volunteering Victoria, and I'm delighted to have an old mate of mine that goes back 5 years, probably since I first started volunteering volunteering New Zealand even, that supported the volunteering sector for, Andy, how many years? 25, would you say?
A little longer than that, sadly.
Keep going. Andy's one of the special people in our sector, and it's a real privilege and pleasure to share the screen with him this afternoon as he introduces the software platform BetterImpact, which is arguably the number one volunteer management software across the world. It is got a glorified status with most, if not all, people that use it, and those that don't use it want to use it, sort of a thing. So it's really great that we can have this opportunity, Andy, to hear more about BetterImpact from your eyes, and anything else that you want to add to this conversation, given you're one of our regular speakers in conferences and workshops. You know, you've done keynotes for us for a good 5 years that I've been involved in, for, as you say, years before that. So Andy, thanks very much for being here. Over to you.
Great, thanks Scott, and hi everybody. Thanks for your time today. It's great to have the opportunity to show you a little bit around the BetterImpact platform. I thought I'd begin just by talking a little about BetterImpact as a company. So we were founded in 2000 and we work globally. So my role is to head up the Australian and New Zealand division of the company. In that capacity, we deal with, I think last count, about 450 unique clients and about 3,500 installations of our volunteer management software across both companies, across both countries. We've really found in recent months with COVID around the place that for many people it's been the opportunity to start to think about, wow, for the first time we kind of really need to push on and think about how we engage with our volunteer workforce remotely, which is exactly what our system is designed to do. It really is an end-to-end volunteer management solution. Like any volunteer management solution, it is not designed to do and be absolutely everything. There are other parts of that process, like interviewing and good regular volunteer leadership practices, but to have the tools that enable you to be able to quickly and easily undertake what was previously quite a complex task. And from our goal, it's always about how do we then encourage people to be able to enhance their volunteer engagement rather than sitting there looking at Excel spreadsheets and doing a lot of manual work, is really the goal. So we have a couple of philosophies. One is good software is never finished. And so from that end, our software is always changing. In fact, about an hour ago, we had our most recent update, which happens about every 6 weeks. And when we do those updates, we are adding new features into the software that people immediately kind of morph into. The other one is that volunteers should not be passive in their volunteer engagement. And so a very quick and initial thing to understand with BetterImpact is that we have two interfaces. One interface is the interface that an administrator will see. The other is one that a volunteer can see as well. And we often hear the argument that, you know, my volunteers are a bit older and they're not very tech savvy. And we kind of challenge those preconceptions, because increasingly more and more volunteers have email addresses and, you know, they can use very simple technology platforms, and that's exactly what we have here. So I'll show you both of those interfaces as we move our way through. The other couple of preliminary kind of things I wanted to get out of the way. One is that we have essentially two versions of our software. So one is what we call a standard account or a standard system, and that is essentially a single database system. The other is what we call an enterprise system, and that is where an organization has the ability to link together multiple databases. So a good example would be a council or an aged care network, where each, you know, the library and then the transport services and the recreation team, they all have their own individual databases managed by their own team, but then centrally those things are linked together by the enterprise functionality. So it means people at the local account can only deal with their own teams, but people at that global level can deal and communicate with everybody. The other really important thing I want to talk about is support, because whenever you look at any solution, and I'm guessing people are considering a whole range of different things, we're really big believers in finding the right solution for what you need it to do. But we also believe that support is really critical. So our tagline as a company is we're here to help. And so we have, and you have the advantage of an international network of support team members. So we have offices in Toronto, in Chicago, and Seattle, here in South Australia, and also in London. So we don't always work 9 to 5 these days, especially working from home. So you may be unfortunate enough to be madly working on your database at 10 o'clock at night. You're going to have access to immediate support, which we believe is really important. You also have access to nearly 100 training videos, our online manual, and a 1-800 number that would get you through to our team around the world as well. So we've got that well covered, and believe that good software is actually about helping people to have good experience with it. I'm going to see what I can do here about jumping into the right screen. Let me have a go here. So I'm hoping that you can all see that screen there. Scott, we're good to go? Yep. So this is the screen that you would see as an administrator in our system. And so another thing around administrators, we don't charge you for every extra administrator you have. You can have as many as you like, and you can also limit what each administrator is able to do within the system. So we can shut down various pieces of functionality. When I talked about the system as being an end-to-end volunteer management platform, I guess that begins with applications. And so there are a range of ways that applications can occur in our system, but I want to give you a very quick look at what that could look like. And this will also help us just to understand some of the customization abilities of the system as well. So I can very quickly in this system generate a link that would bring a potential new volunteer to a link on your website, or you can post a link onto a tweet or a social media post, which would bring them to a page that is completely branded based on your organization's needs. So all of the public pages can have your own banner across the top, and then all the kind of buttons and boxes and other bits and pieces that you see in here can all be very, very easily matched to the branding that your organization has. The idea with this page is essentially it's an advertising page within the database itself. So here where we have this static picture of a museum, you could even embed a video on there, having a volunteer talk about their great volunteering experiences and so forth. And then importantly, as potential volunteers scroll down the page, they get to start to learn about the kind of opportunities that you have. We call these general interests, and these general interests can be explored again, rather than a static image. You can have a video link to this, and of course you can have as little or as much information about that role as need be. Importantly, what we're trying to do here is get people to fill in the application button, because at this point nobody's applied for anything. And when they apply, they will see a couple of pages of information. First page of information will be contact information, and then the second page of information will be anything else that you want to learn about that person at the time that they apply. And that's a really important element of our software. That 90% of our software is 100% built on you and your organizational needs. So unlike other pieces of software where there's lots and lots of boxes that you get to tick that are kind of pre-formatted into the software, here you can just build in whatever it is that you like. And in fact, for new members that come on board with us that want our support in that setup process, we actually get them to send us their application forms and other documents, and we kind of electronically build those in and work with them to make them look the way that they should look. The other thing I'll very quickly say on this page, is that quite literally at the tick of a button, or in fact the unticking of a button in the administrative view, we can remove any of these opportunities that we have now met our maximum quota for and we're no longer currently looking for. So we can essentially switch them off from advertising them and then switch them back on if we have vacancies again. When a person applies, just to carry that thought through, they will appear here on your homepage as an applicant. The volunteer can receive a personalised email from you. So, dear Andy, thank you for applying for our organisation. Here's the next steps. And you can receive a notification that they have applied as well. This series of numbers represent what we call status in the system. And status helps us to track the life cycle of a volunteer. And we can very quickly and very easily move volunteers around from being an applicant to someone that's waiting for, say, a police check to come back, to being a member of our regular accepted team. We can also tag people as being short or long-term inactive. So think of people that have gone on holidays, had some surgery, maybe they just help you once a year for a fundraiser. So they're part of your extended team. They're just not part of your day-to-day team. And then really importantly, you can archive old records and you never get billed for those, but it just means that at any point, you can dig up a record of a person that's no longer with you, look up old records about that person, give another organisation a reference, whatever the case may be, or indeed reinstate them if they come back. So status plays an important role in the system in terms of helping us to track things. Sitting around those numbers, we have this series of kind of orange and grey boxes, and we call those system alerts. And so these are alerts that are generated from stuff that's going on within the database system that we want an administrator to pay attention to. So some of these are simple kind of recognition alerts. So here's a list of the 2 people that in the next week are going to have an anniversary date. And we can see on the right-hand side of that box that they are coming up for 11 and 7-year anniversaries. And again, right from here, we could flick them an email and kind of congratulate them, or text message and so forth. So some of these are simple little recognition alerts. Others of these alerts tell us some more important things that are going on. And I'm not going to run through all of these, but the 2 that I like to highlight are these 2 here. And these are what we call qualification alerts. So keeping in mind that 90% of the software is 100% customized by you, what expiring and expired qualification alerts tell us are things that have an expiry date that are coming up for expiration or that have already expired. So first aid certificates, driver's licenses, working with children checks, anything like that at all, you can build into the system. You can track what those compliance measures that are coming up for expiry. And again, right from here, if I wanted, I could send an email to all those people with a new first aid application form or whatever it might look like, and update and catch up with people on that particular piece of information. A couple of other really quick things on the homepage, and you really are getting the abbreviated version today. But one thing is the ability to search within our system. So I'll just take this opportunity to talk a little about searching. So the searching ability in our system is very powerful. And so as long as you have built a field of information into the system, you can then search by it. So I might want to find all the people that live in Brunswick East, I can very quickly do that. I might want to find all the people that are under the age of 18, I can very quickly do that. I might want to find all the people that live in Brunswick East and who are under 18 and who have an expiring driver's license. I can build those kind of searches in as well. And where we need to do those searches on a regular basis, rather than having to kind of go off on the first day of next month or every Monday morning and remember how I did that last time around, I can save and pin my regular searches right here to my homepage. So it means now that any time that I click on these, it'll very quickly just actually go off, look up the criteria, find that list of people for me to be able to then communicate with or deal with in whatever case it may be. Where we have searches that contain a date field, we can actually build in searches like this one here that are dynamic. So if I wanted to find all the people who had an expiring police check, I can actually create that so it shows me all the people with an expiring police check next month or in the current month. So if I'm doing that search in June, it shows me July. If I'm doing it in November, it shows me December. It's all pre-formatted once I build that search and actually save it. So it's really an example of how very quickly we can access those core pieces of functionality within the system, bring them to our homepage and achieve what would have taken considerable time in the past, quite literally at the push of a button. The other thing you may notice is there's a whole range of different little icons running down the left-hand side here. And that's just to say that we can create searches that generate lists, that generate reports, that send emails, that generate text messaging, that generate things like phone lists and mailing labels as well. So there's a whole range of different ways that those things can be used. The other couple of things I wanted to highlight on the homepage, one relates to this list here at the bottom. And so we're very good in volunteer leadership at tracking the number of hours and the number of volunteers we've got. And now I know, yay, I've got 100 volunteers who gave us 1,000 hours. That's a great metric to have, but it doesn't actually tell us anything about what those 100 volunteers achieved in the 1,000 hours. So if they came along and sat in your coffee room and drank tea for 1,000 hours, they might as well have really stayed at home. So one of the things that we can build into the system is what we call feedback fields. So feedback fields, again, are 100% customized by the metrics that you want to measure based on what a volunteer is trying to achieve for you. And the way that these work is they get built into the system and attached to the jobs or the activities that they relate to. And when a volunteer comes along and is logging hours for a particular role, and I'll talk a bit more about logging hours in a little while, a volunteer will be asked a series of questions based on the job they were doing on that day. So if I've been driving a vehicle today, as I log my hours at the end of my shift, a couple of questions will pop up and they'll potentially say, how many passengers did you transport today? How many kilometres did you travel? Where those feedback fields are numeric in value, I can then start to generate reports based not just on hours, but also on feedback. So we can see what individual volunteers have achieved for us. Individual volunteers can see what they have achieved for us. But more importantly, we have that kind of more global metric to be able to say, in the 1,000 hours, 100 volunteers drove 19,000 kilometres and transported 600 people. So it really helps us to quantify the impact that volunteers are having. The other kinds of feedback fields are those where people can provide text feedback. So think about a question at the conclusion of a shift like, if there were any incidents that occurred today, please report them here. And now as an administrator, we can pop in here and we can learn the feedback that people have given to us and we can follow up on those things. So that's particularly helpful where as an administrator, you're not necessarily seeing your volunteers as they arrive and leave day by day. Just while I'm talking of hours, it's probably an opportune time just to say that hours can be logged in a whole range of different ways in our system. So an administrator can log hours for an individual volunteer or for groups of volunteers at any one time. Volunteers can also log hours on our behalf, and this is always our preference. And they can either do that through their profile, or they can do that using our time clock functions. So time clocks can either operate by volunteers arriving and leaving from a central location where you would have, for example, an iPad or a computer set up. They would use their unique username and password potentially and log in when they start and log out of a shift. And importantly, what happens when people use the time clock is that this alert here on the homepage will actually light up and tell us who has arrived and what they're currently doing. So even if we are self-isolating and we're working from home, but our volunteers are going in, we can actually see that the required people have arrived and that the required people have left. Also a great, that whole thing about logging off is a really great one, because particularly if you have volunteers working in community settings, we can make sure that people have actually gotten home safely. And if anyone ever forgets to log off, we can always come in and kind of adjust their hours and switch them off the clock. But at least we can keep tabs of volunteers that are arriving and leaving. And again, at the time that they conclude, they're going to be asked any feedback fields. In addition to computers and iPads, we also have our BetterImpact My Impact app, which is available from both the Apple Store and also the Android Store, both freely available. And both of those, regardless of where you get it from, have the ability for volunteers to be able to log in and out electronically, actually using their smartphones rather than any other device. Let me give you a very, very quick look through a volunteer profile. So the quickest way for me to search for a volunteer is simply to type their name in. You'll notice that we can pop photos of volunteers into their profiles. When we do a search for a volunteer, we have a whole range of tabs that come up, and I'm just going to touch on a few of these in the short time that we have. But we notice here that Jim is a volunteer who has the status of accepted. And this dashboard page is a page that automatically populates as this volunteer interacts with our organization. So here Jim can see, his or we can see Jim's contributions. We can see how he's contributed hours, and Jim will have similar kind of metrics that he can see as well. The contact tab contains basic contact information. This is part of the 10% of the system that we can't change greatly, although we can obviously choose Australia and Australian states, and we can get rid of terms like zip code and cell phone and Americanized dates and all of that within the system. The couple of tabs I just want to focus on for the purpose of this short demonstration are the custom fields and the qualifications tab. So this page called Custom Fields starts life completely as a blank page. So this is a part of the system that you are going to build for yourself and you're going to have control of moving forward, or that we might help you to build initially. So you're in control of these headings, you're in control of all the custom fields that get asked, and you're also in control of how you choose to capture each field of data. And there are 8 different data fields that we use. So we see most of them here. So date fields and number fields are 2 of them. Long and short text fields are another 2 of them. Simple yes, no, and customized drop-down lists can be created. And then the other 2 kinds of fields, one is a file field where we can upload a document directly into that volunteer's profile. And then down here we have checked boxes as well. So what are custom fields? Well, essentially they are a place that we can store information about our volunteers. And as I explained, we can look that information up in a very powerful way. The other couple of purposes around custom fields, aside from simply capturing information, is that some of this information will give us a demographic breakdown of our team. So gender, for example, on this page, we'll be able to look at our gender breakdown of our team and potentially kind of compare those in reporting against, say, the national standards of volunteering. As many or as few of these fields can be attached to your application form as well, so that as people apply, we're not just finding out who they are and where they live, we're learning languages they speak or other information that we might want to gather. And then importantly, there's an opportunity to create custom fields that our volunteers will never kind of get to interact with, say on an application form, but these are kind of back of house induction checklists and similar kind of things that we are going to choose to use for checks and balances to make sure that we've achieved all the appropriate hoops for our new volunteers to jump through. So 100% customized by you at the start, but you also understand how to change and tweak these as you move forward, which means you're never beholden to us to come back and say, we want to add some fields, how long will it take, how much will it cost, all that kind of stuff. And then the qualifications tab, and I spoke briefly about this, but qualifications play 2 very, very important roles in the system. One we mentioned already, and that is that we can put expiry dates against any qualifications that we create and be reminded of that those compliance checks are coming up. The other way that qualifications work and I like people to understand them or think of them as being a not negotiable. So a qualification is a not negotiable skill, attribute, license, quality that a volunteer categorically must have in order to be able to undertake a particular role for us. And so let's take a simple example that I've created a job called a driving volunteer driver's job. As I create that job or that activity, the system will ask me if there's any not negotiable qualifications that go with that. And I say, yes, you must have a current driver's license or you can't be a driver. So once I have tracked that both against the job, but also in here against this volunteer's record, two very important things happen. First of all, if I, as an administrator, am looking for people to drive, the system will essentially shortlist just those people with the current driver's license and bring them to me to consider, and it will exclude all the volunteers that do not have a current driver's license. But the other thing that's more important is that if we want our volunteers to be logging into their profile and looking for vacancies that we have, we can, these qualifications also work so that volunteers only see those things that we want to allow them to see. And one of the ways that that happens is using qualifications. So now, unless I have a current driver's license, I don't see the driving opportunities once I'm logged in as a volunteer. And I'll leap across and show you that view in just a moment. So a couple of important roles there. So a couple of other things, communication. There are a whole range of ways that we can communicate with our volunteers. So emails, we have the ability to send text messaging out of the system. You can create mailing labels and phone lists. With our emails, just to kind of very quickly show you some of the functionality there. One of the things that you can do, so in this case, I'm going to send an email to all my accepted people. It's actually found 191 people on my list. And what I can actually do here is I can insert what we call a first name placeholder here and personalize this message. So it'll now go to Dear Bob, Dear Betty, Dear Harold, Dear Andy, as a personalized email from whichever admin is sending that message. That coding can be used anywhere within the body of the email. And we also have the ability to use email templates, which of course save a lot of time. When we combine those pin searches I showed you earlier with email templates, we can literally now find all the people having a birthday this week, choose a template, hit send literally at the push of 2 buttons. We've identified that group and sent a personalized email to them with instructions about their police check expiring or have a happy birthday or whatever that might be. The system will capture a history of emails, both bulk emails that have gone to everybody, but also if I sent this to 191 volunteers, in 191 volunteer records, there will also be a history of the fact that that person received an email. And that's here in the communications tab of Jim's profile, where we can see his email and text history. The other couple of things I wanted to show you very quickly in here. One is that we have the ability to leave private notes about this volunteer that is never visible to a volunteer. So this system will automatically date, stamp, and chronologically order those note entries. So a lot of people are curious about that. And carrying on the communications theme, at the time that volunteers log in, potentially through their portal or using the time clock function, we can leave them a group messaging, but we can also leave them a personal note. So the group messaging is what we saw back on the home page. And so that's this bit of news here, and I'll show you where this shows up in the volunteer view in just a moment. This is an example of a piece of static news, but increasingly many of our members will use this as a living newsletter. So they'll have today's date with today's news, and then tomorrow they'll push that down and put tomorrow's news above it, so that as volunteers are logging in, logging out, they're up to date with what's happening around the organisation. Okay, very quickly, I just want to mention rostering, because obviously that's a huge consideration for people. So without going into all the nitty-gritty details here, you can create as many jobs as you want in our system. And we essentially have two kinds of jobs. One job is the kind of job that we need a volunteer to undertake, but we don't really care when they're doing it. So think of the board chair. They're going to be involved in board meetings, but they're probably also going to be working and doing work on behalf of the organization, you know, on a Saturday afternoon and things like that. So those roles that we don't care when they're happening, we would create as an unscheduled role. The other kind of role are those roles that are on a roster, where we need to know we've got 2 people on the information desk from 9 to 1, another 2 from 1 to 5, 7 days a week. So when we build a job or an activity in our system, we're given lots and lots of choices about who gets to see it, how many people we need. We can put job descriptions into these areas. We can add feedback fields that relate to that job. We can add the qualifications or the not negotiables that go with that job. It's quite a complex piece of the software because different organizations want to deal with activities in different ways. The point I want to make is once we've created a job, there are a number of ways people can become associated with it. One way is that as an administrator, I can allocate tasks to a volunteer. So the way that I would do that here in Jim's profile is hit the assign button. There's a list of jobs, but again, importantly, this list of jobs are only jobs that Jim is allowed to see based on the settings I have created, and particularly on qualifications. So I can very quickly here add Jim to a job, add Jim to a shift. I can add Jim to multiple shifts, maybe his regular Monday morning shift for the next 6 months. So I can do that literally at the push of a button. I can also indicate Jim's interest in a particular shift, or I can add him to the backup list. What a lot of organizations will do is create, say, a 6 or a 12-month roster, and they'll actually work their way through and have an administrator put all their regular people into their regular slots, particularly where a shift requires, say, a key volunteer that's done a advanced piece of training. That way they know that they've got all the appropriate people in the appropriate slots. And then they'll make it possible for volunteers to fill the gaps around those key people. So even though volunteers can also assign themselves to a role, it need not be admins do it or volunteers do it. It's often that hybrid of both groups doing it. I want to take, before I jump out of that, once we have people on the roster, just to show you a couple of things, and I'm just gonna, I'm already in Jim's profile. So once I've got Jim on the roster, I can be reminded about what it is that Jim is doing for me. So here's his upcoming shifts that he's doing for me. I can remove him very quickly from any of these if I need to, but most importantly, at the bottom of this page, I can generate a roster just for Jim, just for the month of June or July or August. And if Jim has an email address registered in his profile, I can flick him an email, and that email will have his roster already attached to it. In the same way that I can generate a roster just for Jim, I also have access to a whole range of other roster reports in here as well. So I could generate a roster for the information booth for the month of June that shows everybody on every day. And there's a range of other rosters outside of calendar view rosters that I can also produce as well. So the system will do the hard work and produce those rosters for us once we've created the activity and people have been assigned to those activities. While I'm in reports, there are a range of other pre-built reports. And then there is also the ability to drag whatever fields of information you want out of the system into like an Excel environment and generate your own reports as well. Just to show you an hours by category report, just to kind of illustrate that our reports are not just a bunch of numbers and graphs, but they actually give us some nice graphics as well that we can cut and paste and present to the CEO or the board, which make it all look pretty impressive. The final page I want to show you before I jump to the volunteer view is, so once we create some jobs and we give volunteers jobs and we do our rostering and all the rest of it, the other key thing that we need to understand as volunteer managers is where are the gaps? Where do we need to focus our attention to ensure that we have enough people doing enough things to make life go on? So there's a few different views of this page, and I like to choose the busiest of the three. And again, I'm just giving you the very quick skimmed through version. But if we look at tomorrow here as an example, what we see is a fairly busy page, and our fictitious museum here has lots of activities. And while it's a busy looking page, it's actually a really easy page to interpret once you understand what you're looking at. And you do that by looking at these colored icons running down the left-hand side of the page. And they simply work like this. A tick, you're good to go. A tick is telling you that you've got the required number of people that you need for that shift, and you can rest easy. An exclamation mark is essentially telling you, hey, you've still got a bit of work to do. So if I was to take this red guest services role as one very quick example, I can see I've still got work to do here. But importantly, I can see I have the number 6 sitting over here under a column called BL. And to cut a long story short, that's telling me I've got 6 people on my backup list for this job. So how do I find those people? Quite simply from this page, I click on that link. I choose to look for people on my backup list. I hit search, it goes off and finds people, and now I can assign them across and then reach out to those people. And now I have a tick. So it's a pretty quick, simplified way of showing you that page, but this dashboard page is really designed to bring expressions of interest and people on the backup list all to one place for you to have a quick snapshot and understand where you need to be focusing your attention. All right, let me see if I can flick across to the volunteer view, which would be this one here. All right, so volunteers would enter through myimpactpage.com with their unique username and password. Again, the first thing that you will notice is that this page is fully branded with your organization's branding. This particular demo account has our donor module in it. I'll talk a little bit more about our other modules in a moment. So anything you see related to money, kind of just ignore for now, because that is related to donor management. But here on the homepage, what the volunteer can see is there's that personal note that's been left for them. Here's that bit of group news that we saw earlier. They can read your social media. They also have you have the ability to share with them key documents you might want them to be able to access from within their profile. So that is all available through our document library. Recently, we have launched badges. And so badges at the moment are connected to those qualifications, but also connected to our e-learning training modules. So one of the other things that you can do within our system is create training modules where you upload some text or a video, you have volunteers watch or read that content, they then answer a series of multiple choice questions and answers to prove that they have understood that. And then once they have undertaken that successfully, so here's a quick example. Once they have undertaken that successfully, the system will automatically update a qualification in that volunteer's record to let you know that they have completed whatever training it is successfully. If that qualification has an expiry date, when they complete a e-learning module, it will automatically put next year's expiry date in, and we'll open that up for them to do again, say in 11 months time, so that it can be up to date in 12 months time. And this notion of badges comes about because of that. So we can now create and attach badges to any training that they might have completed, so that we're kind of gamifying that for our volunteer team, and they can be proud of the achievements that they have made. Also, in the volunteer environment, they obviously can see a summary of their hours. And here under the volunteer tab, if we want them to, they can come in and look around for opportunities where we might need some help. So again, the only thing that Victoria is seeing here are activities or jobs that she is qualified to see and that we want her to see. So if she was looking at the information booth and to try and find some opportunities there, she could add herself to the backup list, but then she can come through and she can see that some shifts are full. Some she can still sign up for, and some she has an overlapping shift. So the system prohibits her from signing up for more than one thing at once. Just like I showed you from the administrator point of view, that an admin can see the volunteer's schedule. The great news is volunteers can also see their own schedule. If we want them to, they can remove themselves from shifts that they've confirmed for, and we can limit them to maybe only doing that up until 24 hours before the shift. And importantly, volunteers can download their own roster. So even though we can do it for them, they can also do that for themselves. And the really neat thing is that also through their portal, volunteers can choose to subscribe to receive a once a week automated email that has the next 2 weeks worth of shifts automatically attached to it. Or if they use, Yahoo, Google, Outlook calendars, they can also subscribe to have their calendar feed linked with their next shifts, and those next shifts will automatically be embedded into their own personal electronic calendars as well. So they can choose to do all of those things. I'm just flying through these tabs. I'm going to give you some tips of where to go and find more information once we are done. But this is just an example of one of the places volunteers can log hours. And if I choose the information booth as an example, you'll see that the volunteers ask for how many hours they work. But here's 2 examples of feedback fields that are related to that particular job. So this is how volunteers would give us feedback about what they have achieved. The reports tab will show volunteers a summary of the hours that they have worked, but also any achievements that they have made. And volunteers are able to download these reports and take them to a job service provider or a job interview or those kind of things if they need to do that as well. Finally, the contact tab is a place where volunteers can communicate with you either individually as an administrator, but we also have a feature called committees. And so committees is where we can allow members of a group of volunteers we have connected with that committee to be able to email one another without having to have the personal details of all the other members of that committee. So that can be quite helpful in the context of the system as well. And then their profile button is where they can update as much or as little information as we want that we have captured about them and have some control over their own profile. The other thing I didn't mention already was around the time clock is that the other mechanism that we have with time clock, particularly for older people that might be a bit reticent or not be able to remember their username or whatever, is that you can download and give the volunteers a copy of a QR code that they scan when they arrive and when they leave as well. So you can set your iPads up to allow that to happen also. So that's a pretty quick run through of the key features. There's just a couple more things I want to talk about, and then I'm happy to take questions or whatever the case may be. But one of the things that I haven't had a chance to talk about, but in addition to volunteer impact, we do also have modules for member impact, for client impact, and also for donor impact. And so you can learn more about all of those on our website. So often volunteering organisations have others that are engaged in their organisation in those ways. The other couple of things that I'll very quickly show you, if I come back to Safari, is sorry, I'm just trying to find the right page and I've got little icons all over my page here. Let me just grab it here. Sorry, folks. On our website, you will see a link to all of our pricing. So if you're curious about pricing, please come in and have a look. We have a little calculator in here that explains how that works. But essentially this system in a single standard account, you're looking at a few dollars per volunteer per year. $3 to maybe $5 or $6 per volunteer per year for a system that essentially does everything. And the other resource that I would point you to is the fact that on our website, you can access a free trial account if you want to get in and have a bit of a play. And so we have the ability for you to either download a blank template, or what I like to encourage people to do is find a sector that is as close as possible to what you do. And then what you will do, what you'll see when you download those trials is qualifications, custom fields, and so forth will have some fake kind of fields in there that will just ensure that you are getting a good sense of the kind of information that goes where. You'll also have access to our trial guide that will help to walk you through that as well. So with that, Scott, I think I'll be quiet. I think my time is up. Back to you.
Andy, thanks so much for that. What an incredible overview of the Better Impact system. Folks, we've got a couple of minutes if you want to throw any questions into the Q&A or into the chat function to talk about anything that Andy's gone over, or you want to Andy to talk any further about anything in particular. Andy, what I really like is the personalization of your platform. You know, I love that quote of 90% of 100%, 100% of 90% or something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Either way, there's a lot of customization.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and we truly believe that that's important because every not-for-profit is slightly different.
They're all also built on a meaningful relationship, aren't they? I mean, if you start out with that sort of vital information, it gives you such a canvas to be able to build on and develop further engagements and to know what they want to do and how they can further be engaged in your organization. It isn't just a kind of a hit and miss sort of scramble then, is it?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. So, folks, feel free to chime in with any questions. Andy, what do you think is the proudest part of the platform for you? What do you think sets Better Impact aside from the competitors in this market space? What is it that says this is what I'm most happy about?
Look, for us, I think for us it's two things. One is good software is never finished, and so it is about the fact that, you know, we are constantly tweaking and changing and morphing the software to be relevant to modern day needs. And even out of C19, we've learned that there's been some things we've had to jump in and do fairly quickly. So that's definitely one of them. But probably our biggest thing is the thing around help and support and making sure that people have a meaningful experience. And all of our support team come from strong volunteer management backgrounds. We're not techies at all. As you said, I did 30-something years in volunteer leadership. Karen and Dahlia, who work with me in the Australian office, Dahlia has worked with all the Adelaide Festival networks, so WOMAD and all of those festivals. And Karen's had a long background in aged care, community services, hospitals and local government. So we know what the challenges are from a very practical point of view.
And there's so much depth in that, as you said, you know, to be able to do something at 10 o'clock at night and know that there's somebody on the other end of the line that knows their stuff is really valuable, isn't it? Andy, we've got two questions coming, so thank you, Lou and Faye. I'll get to them both here, and if you've got any more questions, please use this opportunity. Andy is a guru and talk, we know, for ever and a day, so we'll make the most of him while he's here. Lou asks, Andy, can you generate a roster for a particular group of volunteers?
Absolutely. So you can generate so when we create activities, we build our jobs under a common heading. So think of guest services as being a heading, and then there might be 3 jobs: information desk, tour guide, and something else might be the jobs that sit under that heading. So you could generate a roster that is for guest services that includes all 3 of those jobs, or you could generate a specific job just for the information booth. So no problems at all.
And Faye asks that, first of all, she comments that she really likes the idea of badges. Are they in use now, and have you had positive feedback from volunteers and administrators?
Yes and yes. So badges have been in train now for probably about 8 or 9 months, I think. So they are currently only attached to qualifications, but I know that our development team are doing some hard work so that we can expand the use of qualifications into some other areas, hours people have worked, that kind of stuff. We also have badges for administrators as well, so that administrators, when they're logged in, can be acknowledged for the kind of parts of the system that they have gone in and explored.
And does that tie into the gamification concept that you mentioned earlier as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Just trying to encourage people not to get too comfortable with the software, but just to say there's always something else to explore. We're all very busy people, and so often we use software only to a very small part of its capabilities. And we want to keep pushing the boundaries for people because we know the benefits that are there.
Yeah, brilliant. Andy, Emma asks, what is member impact?
Yeah, so member impact is essentially a scaled down version of volunteer impact. So member impact enables you to create, so with those custom fields that I was talking about, when you build those custom fields, you can, if you had member impact in a system, you can say, hey, this custom field called gender is something that I want to learn, whether it's a volunteer or a member. It's a common field that I want to show in both accounts. But then it might be a field like membership level or membership number, which has nothing to do with volunteers. So we can have those fields appear only in the member module. So it doesn't allow, member module doesn't allow you to do things like create activities or jobs. It's simply here's a member profile. Here is their contact details. Here is other information we want to learn about them. And that could be that their membership fees are due or paid or whatever the case may be. And I think in the longer run, I was asked this question earlier today, that as we move forward, my hope is that we are going to be able to also receive membership kind of fees and stuff through the system as well. We can kind of already do that through our donor impact module. I think that will be an extension that we look at later on. Terrific.
Time for a couple more questions, should there be any. Andy, you ran a conference just before COVID finished. It sold out really quickly. I believe it was a really successful day. It just goes to show, doesn't it, the kind of the movement that Better Impact generates amongst its users, doesn't it? You know, it's Kevin Roberts calls them love marks. You know, it's a sort of product that defies, you know, conventionality, because it you know, builds its own sort of a community of such, really, doesn't it? And I think, you know, Better Impact has really done a good job on that. What are your thoughts on how that community is developing?
Well, it definitely is developing strongly. We now have a physical user group that meets. We're just launching New South Wales. In fact, we would have been having a meeting probably next week if it hadn't been for COVID. But Sydney and Hobart are the only capitals in Australia now that we don't have a user group, and we also have them in Wellington and Auckland across in New Zealand. And so for us, again, it comes out of that we're here to help philosophy, that we want to have a connection with our people, and our greatest advocates are our members. We kind of see ourselves as being partners with volunteer programs. We just don't sit in the office with you, but we're there, you know, virtually to assist and support you in that. So for us, that's a big part, just being able to connect with people. And yeah, the conference was fantastic. It's the first face-to-face conference that we've had. It was a 2-day conference in Melbourne. It sold out within, I think, 4 days or so forth, and we had a waiting list of about 80. Outside of that, for a number of years out of our Canadian office, we have run a virtual conference where across Canada and the United States, volunteer manager networks, DOVIs as they're called over there, they will pull together say, Volunteering Victoria would be an equivalent. So Scott, you would get a group of people together in Melbourne, and then the conference would be beamed in over the course of a day. We would have some key speakers at our Canadian office. We have a studio set up there, and it's this kind of hybrid conference that we've been running, I think, for about 6 or 7 years now. So again, we were right at the forefront of providing that kind of training in partnership with Alive and VPMC, the 2 professional associations in North America.
Andy, last question from me, and then unless anything else comes up on the chat function, we'll wrap it up. But my final question is, what is the next big thing for Better Impact? What's on the horizon? What can people look forward
to? That's a good question. I think the main thing for us is just continuing to enhance the things that we have in the system. I know that there is, I'm not completely privy to all of our development programs, but I know that there's that people are looking at kind of our donor and our member impact and looking at how we can beef those up even more. And I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but essentially our product development is based on feedback we get from our members, and then the ability for our members to kind of democratically vote on the things that they want. And so that can change quite frequently based on what people are asking for. Lost your volume there, Scott. I can't hear you.